Hi, I'm Mothershaw, Chief Identity Strategist at the Open Identity Exchange, and it's my pleasure to be talking to you today about digital identity, and particularly why now is the time for digital identity. So today, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on who OAX are, tell you a little bit about what a digital identity is, and then really most of the presentation will be looking at why now is the time for digital identity. Why is it coming, and why do you need to prepare for it? And part of that is, what are the benefits that you will receive from using a digital identity? So why should you be looking to adopt and be planning to adopt digital identity? And then when you do, what should you be looking for in a good digital identity? So who are OAX? We are a members organization, and we have around 60 members, from very large global corporates to small individual consultancies, all of whom share a common vision. And that vision is that all of us can have a digital identity that is trusted, and where an identity has been verified, that we can use anywhere around the globe to prove who we are, to instantly access services. And what we do at OAX is work with our members to collaborate and define what good looks like. So we do a lot about trust frameworks, and I'll come on to talk about that as we go through the presentation. We publish guides produced by our working groups on our website, so people can see what good digital identity looks like. We run presentations, we run events, we run workshops to educate on and encourage collaboration on and adoption of digital identity. And we have an extensive library of papers and guides around what digital identity is, how to use it, considerations you should think about when creating or adopting a digital identity, along with a comprehensive directory of those who provide identity services. So that's great, but what is a digital identity? I'm sure you will have heard the term used many times, so let's take it right back to basics on what a digital identity is. Today, we have many different identities with many different organizations. Every time we go to a different organization, we create an account with them, an identity account, which usually has a username and password that we then need to access that identity. And every time we go to a new organization, we have to prove who we are to that organization, which is time consuming and bothersome and error prone and leads to a lot of abandonment. So this is not a great situation for either the user, who's got to go through this repetitive process, or for service providers, because it's expensive. They're redoing identity verification again and again, and they're losing users as they go because of user frustration. So what a digital identity does is give a user a single digital identity as a way to prove who they are to lots of different service providers in lots of different sectors. So I can use the same identity to prove who I am in healthcare, in retail, to get on a plane, to buy drinks. And I may choose to have more than one digital identity, and that's my choice. And it's important that that's built into the ecosystem. But it's that reusable trust in a digital identity that's important, and it makes users' lives so much easier. So users only have to prove who they are once to the digital identity provider, and then can use that to prove who they are to lots of service providers as and when they do business with them. They can use that identity to log on to service providers, so they don't need a username and password anymore for every service provider they go to. They can use a single key to the door, which is their digital identity, to access lots of different service providers. And all of that reduces costs for service providers and improves onboarding rates, and also reduces fraud. So all of this sounds pretty good, both from a user perspective and from a service provider perspective. So how does that actually work? Well, at its simplest, you might want to get on a plane, and to do so you need a passport. So the airline might ask you to present your passport via your digital ID, and you do so digitally using your phone, perhaps, where your digital ID is hosted. It could get a little bit more sophisticated. You could then want to buy a glass of wine in the airport. You may be asked if you're over 18. Now, you don't want to show your passport to do that, because that will mean you've got to show all the details on your passport. So your digital ID can determine you're over 18 from that and show that to the bar person so that they know that you're 18 and can serve you with confidence. And then digital identity can do some quite complex things. It can enable you to gather information to prove who you are to, say, a bank for whom you want to open an account. It can determine a status about you. And these examples, one is around that you are AML checked, another is that you are COVID safe based on COVID test or COVID vaccine results. And the digital identity can help you gather the information you need to prove these statuses to service providers. And then you only need to share that status to the service provider in order for them to trust who you are. So from the service provider's perspective, they don't need to get lots of data and gather lots of evidence. They'll just trust that status as presented to them from the digital identity. And all of that needs what we define and describe as a trust framework. So that's how this works in practice, and it fits into your processes at really wherever you want to put it. So you might use digital identity for authentication, because you can trust the user as the key to your door. You might use it to gather credentials for proofing. You might use it to determine those statuses around, are they 18 or COVID safe? You might use it to get other credentials, such as visas for travel, such as education certificates that show you that the user is able to perform a particular role. So there's myriad opportunities for you to integrate digital identity into your existing CIAM solutions. And all of these are options. You can do part of this or some of this. And as you think about adopting digital identity, this is a key consideration. Where are you going to put it in the process, and how closely again are you going to integrate it? But why is now the time? And there's a number of things coming together that mean, from a digital identity perspective, now is the time that it has come of age. First, the shift to digital. COVID has driven a big shift to digital. It was a necessary shift to digital that meant we all needed to work online and remotely. That's proven that digital works very well, and has given us an ongoing appetite for digital consumption of services. So we're now seeing that acceleration continue, and regulators and service providers moving to digital capable solutions. And biometrics has come of age. So we now use our face habitually to open our phones, our fingerprints. We're seeing vein technology develop very, very quickly, and it works operationally. The false positive rates are under control, and they're being adopted into standards formally so that you can rely on them. Credentials are becoming available. So there's ways to digitize passports and driving licenses, or they can be issued from source as digitally presentable credentials. Open banking has brought banking information to the ecosystem. So you can now get at a user's banking information, both as proof of who they are, but also proof of some of their financial standing information. And other credentials, here's my, I've blanked out the actual QR code, but here's my NHS vaccination certificate. So I can now present that electronically as a digital COVID vaccination certificate via my NHS app. So these credentials are now becoming available from various different forms, places. Legislation and regulation are recognizing digital identity. So already within the anti-money laundering and terrorism regulation, the digital identity is acceptable. That was written in, came into force at the beginning of 2020. More recently, in 2021, HM Land Registry adopted digital identity as a way to prove who you are in a property conveyancing transaction. So these are two pretty high trust areas that have really and already adopted digital identity. The next thing is that technical standards are maturing. So it's important that you have a way to consistently integrate with identity providers, and the Open Identity Foundation has OpenID Connect, which is a secure way of accessing the user's data, and they're extending that with an ID assurance standard. And then these credentials come as verifiable credentials, which is a W3C standard. So we're seeing that the technology and the protocols are maturing in order to deliver this information to you. The government in the UK is implementing a trust framework. A trust framework is a really important element of digital identity because it brings the framework that enables the parties to trust each other, the users and the service providers and the identity providers, and the rules that everybody must follow to make sure trust is maintained. And those rules cover things like identity proofing, security, technical standards, presentation of a trust mark to show that the trust framework is in play. What happens when something goes wrong? Does anybody get any compensation? So it's a very comprehensive set of legal rules. And the UK government is currently creating this, co-creating it with private sector in the UK to enable us to be able to illustrate certified digital identities that you can use with confidence. There are many sector-based identity projects then underway that are operating underneath that framework, looking at age, finance, pensions, employment vetting, retail payments, and pensions. And OAX is working with all of these to seek consistency across the ecosystem and strive for interoperability. But sector adoption is well underway. And major investment is coming into this sector from governments, from banks, telcos, many independent operators and tech giants, all pouring billions into this area because they know that this is going to be an area that both users and service providers want to move to as we move to full trusted digital transactions. So all of those things are coming together right now. That means we're in a perfect nexus of conditions for digital identity adoption. So because all these things are happening at once and all these things are maturing, now is the time for digital identity. So that's great, it's all coming together. But if you're looking to adopt it as a service provider, what are the benefits for you? Why should you be thinking about digital identity? Well, it solves a number of problems that you have today. It improves your success rates for both onboarding users and returning users. It reduces identity fraud. It increases your compliance because new digital identity proofing techniques are readily accessible. That mean your compliance is more readily achieved. It improves your user experiences, which means it reduces their poor experiences and the cost of loss there. And overall, it enables your shift to digital. Most of these things bring you as a service provider some kind of positive monetary benefit. You either get more customers for whom, therefore, you can do more business, or you save costs. It also will reduce your fraud costs because of the more robust trust framework around it and the authenticators that come along with it. So if you're looking to buy digital identities, what should you be looking for? Well, we would say at OAX, you need to be looking at one that's compliant with a trust scheme and or a trust framework. And as already said in the UK, that trust framework is being written. It will be going into alpha in the summer. And as we progress into next year, schemes will then be entering into pilots to provide certified digital identities that you can consume as service providers that then enable you to start realizing some of these very tangible benefits, both for you and for your customers going forward. So the time's coming for digital identity. At OAX, we'd urge you to start preparing for that. Don't miss the boat as it comes along. Adopt early, and your customers will be the ones who are most satisfied, and your customer base will grow as a result. So in recap, all of these things are coming together. We've got accelerated shift to digital, maturing biometrics, the availability of digital credentials, backed up with regulatory readiness. The underlying technical standards are there. Then the government is creating the trust framework that means from a regulatory point of view in the UK, digital identity is understood. Sector schemes are now picking that up and driving for adoption, and technology companies are investing in this space to enable this to happen and to enable you to get the benefits of digital identity. So I hope that's been a useful overview of what digital identity is and why its time is now, and the benefits you will get from adopting it. So thank you for your time this morning. And if you have any further questions, then I'm very happy to speak to you about them either in the chat later on, or just give me a shout with the contact details below. Thank you very much.